appreciate it. I always like to start with a comment about my voice, which is extremely tired at this point. And so if it cracks like a teenager, my apologies, but it's just mine.
To me, it reminds me of Eleanor Roosevelt.
Does it?
And I like that.
Yes, that kind of strange voice. My name is Sue Gunn. I'm running for Port Commissioner. And I'd like to start with talking about my background in my career. I have an undergraduate degree in political science, a master's in geology, and a PhD in isotope geochemistry. Worked as a geologist for the U.S. Geological Survey for a decade, and while I was there, I was in a leadership program that took me to Washington, D.C., where I worked on the House Natural Resources Committee. And I also did a fellowship in the Department of Interior in the Division of Science and Water. And that's where I got bitten by the policy bug, and so I ultimately stayed in DC and I got a job as a director of budget and appropriations for the Wilderness Society. It's one of the larger national environmental groups, and it allowed me to learn how to do policy through, fiscal analysis, but also how to do policy through the appropriations and budget process, which is a kind of unusual window into activism. After 10 years there, my hair turned white. I thought I needed to move to a beautiful place, and so I came out to Olympia. I always say I moved to the wrong Washington for 10 years, but then I finally got it straight and made it to Olympia. And when I got here, I had several small jobs with various groups. The first one was as a Washington State director for a group that worked with state and federal employees that blew the whistle on environmental infractions in their agencies. I worked with the Washington Federation of State Employees to get a bill passed to expand whistleblower rights and their protections. I later worked with the Water Law Group as their government affairs director and introduced a bill to create a groundwater monitoring system in the state because ecology has no idea of the abundance of water available, groundwater available. I finished off my career as a campaign director for a coalition of groups that were concerned about the problem with water quality and stream habitat and the impact of sediments off of old logging roads in the Forest Service. And because of my background in appropriations, we went to Norm Dix, who was the chair of Interior Probes at the time. He created an entirely new program within the Forest Service called the Legacy Roads and Trails Program. And during my term, pumped in about $250 million to rip out old logging roads, replace undersized culverts, repair bridges, and rehab roads that were necessary. And as a result, we created between 800 and 1,000 jobs in rural communities annually through this program. So I have a background with critical scientific thinking and problem solving from the doctorate, fiscal analysis from the years of budget and appropriation, leadership skills related to coalition and consensus building, and some background in economic development and jobs creation. So here I am now running for the port, and the port likes to say it operates like a business. But if it were a business, it would be out of business because every year it loses money. Just last year, it lost $1.4 million. And it compensates for that by taking in taxes, and last year it brought in $4.7 million of pure tax money. And so it's that tax money that allows it to make poor decisions and continue to operate in the red. And so if elected, I would really work to reduce taxpayer burden from the port and get the port to operate in the black. You know, their mission is economic development, but economic development is more than just moving cargo around. I think the port has a commitment to the citizens of Thurston County to try to enhance the economy of this county. And there are many examples across the country of what ports are doing that our port isn't doing. For instance, in the Port of Skagit leases 33 acres of ag land as incubators for organic farms. We have some of the best farmland out by Tumwater Airport. The port could do something like that. The Port of Toledo has a fund that allows low-interest loans to small businesses to do energy efficiency upgrades. The Port of Pittsburgh, the Port of New Jersey, and New York all operate light rail systems. So I think one of the things that I'm very interested in getting the port to do is to become a good neighbor with this community and try to get it to help create local jobs, create a vibrant economy. And part of that process is doing outreach into the community. Right now, a lot of people think that the port is pretty insular, it functions behind this fence. But doing outreach to the cities of this county, working with these counties to find out what their needs are. One of the discussions is the brewery. The brewery sits out here idle. The port could take a bite out of that and become a player. They have that suite of warehouses that small entrepreneurs could utilize if that complex got redeveloped. Before they put up the hands-on museum, there was a warehouse with 11 businesses in there that became displaced by that museum. But there are small businesses could utilize warehouses like that. So, and I guess the other little bit and piece of this campaign is the farmer's market. The farmer's market sits on port property that's leased to the city. And historically, there has not been a whole lot of support from the port for the farmer's market, and that's why 64 vendors at the market have endorsed my campaign. And I look at the market as an example of the kind of economic development that I think is really great. Hundreds of jobs have been created, millions of dollars of revenue, and it's also a place where our community can come together and play and enjoy each other. And so one of the problems with the market was the lease, and as our profits went up, their rent went up, and that's recently been capped. But I think it's important to have a fixed lease so people can anticipate what their costs are going to be, and also there's been threats to take the parking lot back to build a pay-for structure, or more recently, last December, my opponent talked about needing space to lay down logs. And, you know, if the market doesn't have access to free parking, they're going to lose its revenue and their customers. So I think it's something that needs to be protected and supported. So as Port Commissioner, I would work to make the port a better neighbor, to use its, and the port is really incredible, remarkable in a lot of ways because it has taxing and bonding authority. But they can go out for $60 million of bonding without a vote from the public. Both the school district and the fire district require votes. And so I believe the community should be weighing in on how this money is used, why this money is being borrowed, and how it's going to be reinvested. And it would be sort of a whole change on how the port operates and its outreach. But the more I keep talking about this, my opponent's talking about it too, so maybe it will come to pass ultimately. I think that might be it. I am totally open to questions and have endless answers, and I'm getting used to being grilled by the crowd, so any questions?
I'll ask one.
All right.
Do you have any thoughts about what cargoes can come and what cargoes can go from the port?
At the recently women voters meeting, I talked about the need for, I think there's a need for a resolution for environmentally sustainable cargo. I, unlike other people in this room, have an opposition to fracking because of the impact it has. And so I think there's really a problem with that contract. If you don't know much about fracking, one of the things it does is it releases methane to the atmosphere. It's 34 times more effective in trapping heat in our atmosphere, so it's really dangerous. It also is fouling groundwater, people are getting really sick, and it's perpetuating this legacy of the petroleum industry. So I personally oppose, the port went out and looked for that contract, and we are bringing it in from China and moving it to North Dakota, where there's this big effect. So I would look, from what I understand, there are wheat farmers in the eastern part of our state that are taking their wheat to California, to ports there, to ship it away. So it seems to me agricultural products from the east side, once inside, these are things I'd like to explore, and I would like to avoid things that add to increasing global climate change, because I believe it's actually happening and it's really a serious problem.
And are there other things that you take umbrage with? That's being done in the port? Or in terms, like fracking, anything that environmentally impacts us? Are there other things that?
Well, we have dioxin in the sediments out there, and there is a legacy of dioxin on the Port Peninsula. And the port has not characterized where the dioxin is. There was the site with the Cascade Pole where, yeah. But I would say a systematic sampling of the entire peninsula is probably appropriate, and particularly when the port starts talking about development, so that they know what's out there. And so that's more kind of from the scientific perspective, is like we need to know what we're dealing with so that we don't further contaminate things. One of the scientists I talked about pointed out that the port is filled. So even though Cascade Pole has been capped on the top, things could be reaching up from the bottom and being relocated on the peninsula, and I think that's a very serious problem.
Sue, just the other night, your opponent answered a question about dioxin with an answer that sounds pretty good to a layperson, I think. Like, well, if you've got some bad stuff, you pick it up and take it away and get it the heck out of there.
Yeah.
What about that?
That's contrary to the going scientific opinion. Dioxin in an anoxic region is supposed to be left capped with sediments, and that is probably the healthiest thing to do. So you have this conflict between wanting a deep water port or dredging, which remobilizes dioxin, has a potential to move it into the water column and precipitate it at Priest Point Park and West Bay Park and all these places like that. So this is the first dredge operation, a big one in 30 years. Ecology is allegedly on it, and we'll see if they do that or not. But from what I understand, in if dioxin is laid out in Death Valley, in some hot region, it would decompose in about 10 years, but in an anoxic region, we've got thousands of years before it'll break up. So, it's sad, but we do have this really serious legacy of pollution. The port has just passed a bond that's going to put in a stormwater treatment plant to address, the impact of Weyerhaeuser and the bark that goes out in the water, which creates further reduction of dissolved oxygen. And that's costing the taxpayers about $9 million. It took 2 lawsuits for the port to agree to do that. They're under the gun to get it done by next year. For me, if I was a port commissioner, that's something that should have been loaded into the Weyerhaeuser contract when they allowed them to be here. Why should the taxpayer be putting in a stormwater system for a large business that can afford to take care of those things? And so we've got that issue too. Another concern, but it's not something that I particularly feel like has to be shut down, but just as a moment of education, is the shipping of raw logs. It is illegal to ship raw logs cut off of federal and state lands because with raw logs go jobs, mill jobs and manufacturing jobs. So the fact that Weyerhaeuser's cutting trees off of private land is totally legal, they can do this, but it's really kind of the colonial model of taking the resources away and then they mill them, the jobs are there and they use them there. So I think my goal would be to be looking for cargo that is environmentally sustainable and we can deal with the profit off of. One of the things I talk about with the logs is just value added. In the old days, there were mills all around here that have disappeared and gone away. Weyerhaeuser changed from a limited liability corporation to a real estate investment corporation in order to reduce its taxes. And with that is a requirement that no more than 25% of its revenue is tied up in capital improvements, i.e. mills. So Weyerhaeuser is down to 2 mills. And they're not going to bring mills back because their taxes will go up. But, you know, if we had mills in the brewery, if we had ways to, you know, add value to these raw logs and use them locally, local businesses.
Yeah, do you have some thoughts on how to promote the establishment of these things? Because right now, I think the economics are not favorable.
Well, so then you look at the port's taxing and bonding capability. So, for instance, you've got this Thurston County regional planning process going. So I think a strategic plan at the port that does outreach to the community to prioritize.
Would you subsidize them?
That I think you would, based on whether the public wants these things, whether there was public value to them, and whether it would cause the economy to bloom. Because we really have kind of a depressed downtown area, depressed economy in the entire county when you look around. And I think with the port's mission of economic development, it's appropriate for the port to get involved.
We'd have to tax more to do that.
Well, the thing is, these bonds get paid off over time. So you could probably keep it the same tax. I mean, if we wanted something and we agreed to a tax, fine. If we don't agree to something and we don't agree to a tax increase, fine. Can we shift, as our bills are paid off, the existing tax rate to do beneficial things for the community? And what are those? One of the criticisms I have with the port is they have a very old strategic plan that about 2 years ago they updated, but they didn't go out to the public. It was just kind of a staff wish list. And so it's an extension of business as usual. And it seems high time, things have changed, the world has changed in 25 years, that a legitimate strategic planning process is initiated by the port.
Sue? I'd like to ask what percentage of the port's business goes directly to Thurston County?
Is Bob here? My math man? I would assume it would be low.
Lazar, you have any idea?
No.
Oh, Bob, take it.
Well,
Yeah,
no, wait,
do you have any
long
idea?
farm, that's the only jobs that are created.
Where do they live?
But does it create any jobs, actually create jobs?
Well, they have an economic impact paper that they hired someone to do, and they say they create jobs at Smith Barney. You know, any building that has a tenant, they claim ownership of those jobs, which I think is an illegitimate claim. So I don't really think that we have true data on the kind of jobs that are created, and I would suggest they're probably limited.
Well, and may I add to that? It's one of the things I was noticing in your opponent the other night when you had a debate was that he focused largely on the shipping. And so there needs to be a response to that. There are alternatives, really viable alternatives that could be the role of the port.
Sure, and I don't know if everybody knows, but the port has 4 operations. It's the marine terminal, the airport, they lease land, and they own a Swantown marina. And so, you know, the sky's the limit basically in terms of what they can do. And I think the vision has been limited, and they have a history of limited public input. You know, they live behind this, what I refer to the fence, you know, and in many ways, I look at them operating to improve their own bottom line, as opposed to looking how they can help the broader community. And I think that you know, it's capable of doing something like that. I like the idea of light rail. I don't know if that's viable. The mayor of Lacey and the mayor of Olympia have endorsed me, and I think in part, particularly Virgil and Lacey, it's on transportation issues and how to get people out of cars, you know. But you know, I was interviewed by a reporter, and he's like, "What's your vision for the port in 20 years?" And I'm like, it's a community vision. It's really not my vision. I think my vision is I would like to see it serve the community. I'd like it to be environmentally sustainable. I'd like it to operate in the black. I would like it to be more transparent. I'd like to have genuine public involvement. But it's your vision. It's the community's vision on how we use the port's resources and the port's. Because most of these governments, because of Tim Eyman, can't really tax. They don't have the freedom to use funds as the port does. The port's kind of unique at this point in its capabilities and what it can actually do. Yes?
Are you ready to give it over to me for the pitch?
No?
All right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? People love to talk about the port.
Sue,
Yes?
has there been much study on the effects of the number of logging trucks coming and going every day? The exhausts and the damage to the infrastructure and to the downtown buildings? Has anybody really looked at that?
No, nobody has really looked at that, but about 3 months ago, NIH put out a report that correlates autism with diesel fumes. And an individual called me and told me that it was in the Olympian, but I haven't confirmed this. One of the trucks dumped a load on Henderson Boulevard coming into town. So there are issues with that. And, you know, a lot of people wring their hands and say, oh, Olympia is, you know, it's not economically vibrant, and how come small business don't prosper and they go away? And I would suggest that in the heart of this city, we have a 19th century industrial operation that's heavily polluted, and the water is polluted. We got diesel trucks with logs going through. And that basically the feng shui here is not optimal for bringing in hip new businesses, you know, the kind of businesses like the Microsofts of the world, you know. I mean, there's Portland, and there's Vancouver, and there are these cool little towns. And I would like Olympia to be a cool little town, and, you know, I'm okay with the marina being there, but, you know, even brainstorming on what other things that could be done with the marina, you know, is it, you know, someone said, could we bring in cruise ships? Another person is like a water taxi. Could we have a maritime museum? Could we have woodworking shops where you could build small boats and kayaks, you know? I mean, I think that's part of the public outreach process, to see what intrigues in public.
You mentioned 3 or 4 different ideas that might be alternatives to what the port is doing now. One is, you mentioned grain terminals. Grain terminals are very specific. They require either container handling or silos. It's a very expensive thing.
Oh.
You mentioned mass transit. That would be a multi-county,
Right.
multi-jurisdiction issue. You mentioned alternatives meant doing logs. That means mills here. That means very specific mills that are going to turn out the type of dimensional lumber that's used in Japan or China or wherever else, entirely quite different than what is done in here. All of these are great ideas, but none of which are in the purview of the Port Commission, I don't think. How would you expand the authority or the ability to do anything as a Port Commissioner to address any of these issues?
By talking to other people, by talking to other cities, by talking to other counties, by talking to the Economic Development Council, which I've already done, you know. I mean, I think I'm just throwing out ideas of other options, and from what I understand, I think, Steve, correct me, one of the port commissioners was on the east side of the state talking to the folks with agriculture there about how to bring this in. So, you know, what you just said was a series of limitations, but the question is, how do you work around those? How do you do the legwork and the outreach to connect? How do you create a conversation to come up with viable ideas at work? You know, one of the simple ideas is just running kind of a little rail between the brewery to the farmer's market. And like rehabbing the brewery, a lot of parking there, make it a destination site. People come in from Seattle, people come in from Portland, get on a little light rail that takes you down to the farmer's market, bring these two communities together. I think what I'm trying to say is that I am very open to new ideas. I've talked to a lot of people. If elected, I'll be talking to a whole lot more people, and I'll have far more clarity. And I'm going to check with you and you and you and everybody in the community to make sure that this is not just some special interest idea that just serves a small group of people. Dennis?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the port doesn't really have any kind of authority or anything to do with the shipment of logs or the import of fracking material. It's just that they provide support for that.
They went out and looked
Yeah,
for the
it
contract on
wouldn't be- It wouldn't
fracking.
be the business of the port to create lumber mills or to create, you know, add businesses at the brewery or any of that stuff. It would just be, you know, what kinds of development do you support? What kinds of activities do you support?
I disagree with that statement.
Well, there might be more that you can do, but I'm just saying that it's not an argument against, you know, having those kind of ideas to say that this is outside the purview of the port. You know, the port.
I don't think it's outside of the purview of the
Well,
port. The Port of Skagit leases agricultural lands, you know? We've got ports that are running light rail systems. The port can buy real estate.
There is a lot that
The port can buy real estate. The port could buy the brewery if it wanted to. Yeah.
And
Yes.
who would pay for it?
Yes, who would pay
The
for
light
that?
rail?
I think it would have to be, it would have to be ventures that are supported by various governments in the county and collectively private businesses. You know, I mean, we're talking about using the port as part of a larger system to try to solve problems and create a viable economy. Heretofore, the port has just been pretty insular. And so what I'm talking about is making that conversation external to the port and bringing in the players that I discussed. Other cities, other counties, the public, private businesses, Economic Development Council.
Yeah, I just want to point out, I don't know where Dennis's question is coming from, but in the case of the fracking materials, the port went out and aggressively
Yes.
supported this contract, and then their response when questioned about it was that if we didn't do it here in Olympia, somebody would do it.
And somebody would do it.
Well, maybe,
Reality,
maybe not,
somebody
but
will do it.
somebody, but you can say that
But
about.
we're not making money doing it now, so
But
what's the
they could
point?
have stopped it where they were doing it, and they didn't stop it. Why do we do it now? It's too late, it's been done.
Well, it's been done, there's no doubt, but she's talking about
Been done.
moving forward. That contract will expire, and there'll be a point in time when it gets renewed, and she can have the choice or not to
Yeah,
continue.
it's outrageous for the reasons that you suggested, also because it's killing people. I mean, it's not just that it's exacerbating climate change. People are dying out there. If you saw any of those videos that were presented at some of those meetings, that people in those, particularly Native American communities, are dying.
And we need to
Young,
take care of it
massive.
there, right there, we need to stop it there.
You know, we were
And
in
we
America
stop
able
here.
to stop apartheid in South Africa by not investing. And so when you want to make a change, little points all add up to make a greater change. And so if you care about global warming, if you care about any
I do care.
yeah, you know, then you gotta put
I
a,
care about our port.
you don't
And I
care?
hear about logs, you don't want the logs coming through, I mean, okay, but I haven't heard anything that's going to really replace that. And so I hear Olympia just kind of emptying out of businesses, and I'm like, it's just gonna become more of a dirty little empty town.
Yeah, that's
there.
my goal, yeah.
No, I see that point.
There's a puddle in front of your foot.
I thought I was being very socially graceful until I started swirling my wine. I'm trying to put an end to that.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, no, I'm all about creating jobs in the community. I spent some time in Yelm the other day with a guy who ran for mayor, and he was just pleased to punch that somebody who might be a port commissioner actually cared about Yelm and would look at how to use port's resources. Same thing with Tumwater City Council person who was at the league meeting, excited about, and has been lobbying to get the port involved with the brewery. Talking about with the Michael Cade from the Economic Development Council about all the various projects. And, you know, I think that there are other opportunities, and if you don't have the desire to explore them and see what new vision you can bring to the port, you're going to get the status quo.
I think it's interesting that the port's been losing $1.4 million a year while accepting, you know, somewhat, I mean, I'm just gonna say shady contracts, you know, supporting things that, you know, aren't in the best interest of the public at large. And I also wanna, I'm interested in the amount of volume of cargo traffic in other ports in Washington State, like Seattle, and whether companies would be interested in maybe quicker service by switching from Seattle to Olympia. Would that perhaps be possible?
98% of all shipping business goes to Seattle or Tacoma. It's an extra day to come down here and an extra day to go back. So basically, the port has to subsidize contracts to get people down here and bring them in. And before this Weyerhaeuser contract, there were very few ships that were coming in and out. This recent Weyerhaeuser contract with cutting out of Bald Hill has allowed this operation to blossom, but it's impacting our city with the diesel trucks and the impact from that.
Mention also the tugs required to get big ships in and out of our harbor don't remain here. They have to come down from Tacoma as well. So the Port of Olympia subsidizes those tugs that come down and escort ships, that big ships coming all the way down here. So it's not a wonderful marine terminal for all of these reasons.
He was going to ask a question, and I'll let you go.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
He's
I
pointing.
was just gonna move on hers, and that is that all these people that are paid are actually living here, and they have to go up there, and then they have to come down here, and then they have to go up there, and they have to come down here. And we pay for all that. For what?
Right, and there's a huge carbon footprint
What is
that
the
goes
point?
with this port, too. You had a question?
Well, no, I didn't have a question, I was just gonna respond to him a little bit.
Okay.
Because as you pointed out, that there is a day's travel between, for the ship coming down.
Right,
Those two ports, of course, are heavily dedicated to handling
Containerized.
containers.
right,
And so what these folks
Specialty.
have looked at is niche.
yeah.
And that really has to be exploited as niche. What
Oh.
can we do that they don't want to do?
Right.
And that has been something that they have been working on.
Right.
And
What has the port done that is, in your vision, good, like environmental cleanup or whatever that you support, and the walkway, the lovely way that you can walk around the Port Peninsula, except for the industrial area, et
Well, they
cetera?
did the restoration of Mission Creek as,
Thank you, Fred.
say that again? I didn't hear that.
Thank you, Fred. He's the one who initiated that.
Oh, the lawsuit that
I
caused
can-
that to
I
happen?
know it's like-
Yeah,
Wow.
to put it out there.
Yeah, and then, you know, they have upgraded the East Side Park piece, which is sweet. I just think they can do a whole lot more, you know.
It costs money though.
Yeah, I know. I know, but it's, how do you spend your money?
Every year. So I have a question, that's a little along the lines of your question, I don't know your name, but it seems like, to me, the issue isn't necessarily that we're importing and exporting logs from here, but just that the port negotiated such a crappy deal
Yeah.
without foreseeing a major expense. Like, what are we getting for that, or what are they getting for that lease a year? I have in my mind that it's $1 million a year. Is that
That's right.
right?
I don't know.
It is.
So it's $1 million a year, and yet it's a 10-year contract, and they have to do $9 million of water processing upgrade.
Yeah,
So the net on that whole contract is $1 million?
right.
So how does the port keep getting itself
Per
into
year?
these crazy business situations?
Your
where they
taxpayer
can't-
dollars.
But what can you do that will improve the ability of the port to make judgment about what's coming in? Why do you think they're making those kind of mistakes?
I honestly think that there is an attitude of entitlement that goes with taxpayer dollars that allows them to sort of perpetuate the status quo. And heretofore, I don't think they've had to be accountable for their behavior. So you get a candidate like me, or who was that fellow that was in for a while? Sam
Bradley?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few people that have come through who have been critical, but I think times are, you know, the port's sort of in an economic bubble, is the way I would describe it. You know, you've got the federal government on sequester, you've got state employees cut back, they can't do travel, but the port's ED's salary is getting increased, and the port makes these crummy deals, you know? And so I think just, you know, the light of day on this, a conversation about this, both Jim and Bob here have worked really hard to get the port to put out a real budget without fuzzy math, so that the public can really criticize what's going on. I mean, that $1.4 million loss does not include the interest on the debt, which is another $1 million, so it's actually about $2.5 million in losses. So, I think it's just, you know, you go on the inside, you start working on the finances and getting things displayed properly. I would really like to queue up a community conversation so that people get involved with this and can weigh in. Is it ballot issues, you know, do we want the port to do this, do we want to do that? I think it's appropriate to be voting on bond issues that the port's pushing forward, particularly when it's at the level of $20 million, as opposed to a handful of people making a decision on these kind of things. So I'm looking for more transparency and public input to make that transition.
And on that wonderful note, are there any other questions?
This like,
That was the longest little speech ever.
Before you all disperse, the spiel is that among us here are people like Monica Hoover, who initially got Sue to run. And among others. And when we realized we had not only a possible candidate, but a very viable candidate, somebody who could not only handle the job, but make the changes we wanted to see in the port, we all got excited and started backing her, and we had parties. And this happens to be our last fundraiser. We have raised enough money at this point to do 2 major mailings out to the entire county of voters. You know, the list that say, these people are likely to vote, so be sure to get something in their hands to talk about our candidate. We're all excited about that. But we still need money for other issues that are still coming up on
well, we need more mailings.
Right, right. So as her treasurer and as one of her early supporters, as someone who walked beside Walt's car down the
Gay Pride
the Gay Pride Parade back in May, let me all
What does that have to do with it?
let me
And I have a new
appeal to all of
carburetor.
you that we have on the
I
table
thought it was exciting.
remit envelopes, the opportunity to give to the candidate of your choice. So,
Thank you, Zina.
Thank you. And I want to say something.
Are
I
you
want to
authorized to
say,
accept that?
I am.
I want to say that
Thank you.
I think that this was by far the most educational and actually sort of nuts and bolts fundraiser I've ever been to in my whole life. With Sue. Yes. Yes, because you
Which is saying a lot.
engaged at such a nitty-gritty level in all these, yes, such a detailed level. It's usually more fluff. And if there's anything that Sue is not, it's fluff.
no.
And I want to say, I'm just so impressed with your extreme commitment and your ability to engage with all the issues. Do your homework
And continue to do my homework.
continue to do. Yes.
Thank you.
And I'm going to write a big check.
Oh, wow.
And I urge everybody else to do this.
All right. Wow. Do we need a little light in this corner?
Not really.
Not really?
Well, I don't know.
We have you.
Yeah.
That brightens things up.
Oh, look at that. Oh, boy.
God, what's he looking for?
Thank you.
Got an extra pen over there?
Yeah, 9 million. I just wish I had a job so I could say staff.
I gotta ask Sue. Hey, Sue. Yes. How do you make checks out to? What is the word?
Sue Gunn. I knew I recognized you.
My goodness, you guys. Right.
So was I too?